Good afternoon. We are continuing our discussion on The Narcissistic Slave by Frank B. Wilderson. First, I would like to acknowledge that for some of you, you already got your 20 participation points today, and it's possible that it will be for you your last class. Because I know 5 of you already have 5 points, 20 points. So I just want to remind you that next week we will do a revision session, just focusing on an interview that Wilderson made. It's not new material. And Thursday, it will be a drop-in session online for people who have last-minute questions on their last essay. Therefore, I would like to say that it's okay if you want to miss next week, if you already have your 20 points. Thank you so much for your participation and for registering to this course and staying until the end. It was really great having you and meeting you, getting to know you. And thank you for the honor, for giving me a chance to be around you. So we will discuss what we said last class and finish with the narcissistic slave and the discussion as usual. I forgot to give you last time the reference when I talked about the mirror stage from Jacques Lacan. So what you see on the screen is the reference. I used La famille, le complexe facteur concret de la psychologie familiale. Of course, this is the original text, but I provide here the translation. It's not available in the University of Guelph library, but it's possible that you might find it online if you look for it. I'm not able to share it on CourseLink because of copyright issues. Also, yes, I wanted to say that my presentation, it was showing my analysis of Jacques Lacan, my understanding, which is based on the article and heavily influenced by the teaching of Professor Christian Saint-Germain in Montreal, UQAM. So that's my sources. And all we said, if we recapitulate, all we said last time is that for Lacan, the sacrifice that an individual must pay in order to enter into the society as a subject is to alienate himself into this world of symbols and language. Last time we discussed Wilderson and his film theories, Black film theories. He was saying that film theories used Jacques Lacan's conceptual framework to analyze Black movies, and according to Wilderson, that was not satisfying. And since they use Jacques Lacan as a conceptual framework, he decided to attack or to put pressure on Jacques Lacan himself. And Therefore, the rest of the chapter is him putting pressure on Lacan with Fanon. For Wilderson, in order to help a subject free himself from his alienation, which would be his neurosis, for example, narcissism, he has to go to a therapy. And the first stage of the therapy, the subject is in the empty speech. So he talks, but what he's saying does not mean anything, because the subject is under the illusion that he is the master of himself and he can explain himself. So this is empty speech. This is an ego that is under the illusion that he is in control. And with therapy, with analysis, the subject is able to go to the full speech, which is a desirable state. And it's a disorder, it's a self-cancellation, it's a deconstructive work. So this is the subject dismantling all the phantasms that constitute his ego. And this is an idea that both Lacan and Fanon share. In order to help a subject liberate himself from a neurosis, he has to enter into this full speech, a deconstructive work. But the difference between Lacan and Fanon is that Fanon goes farther than Lacan, because for Lacan, the deconstruction is only in the symbolic order. So it's only in the word of language. The deconstruction is in the language. Whereas Fanon, the deconstruction is not just the language, but it's also in the reality, which was for him the armed struggle in Algeria. The armed struggle in Algeria served to liberate the subject from the alienation of the colonialism. Because in the Fanon analysis, it's not just language that precedes and exceeds the subject. As I said, language is what alienates the subject at the beginning. It's also for Fanon violence. For Black people, violence is also something that precedes and exceeds them. That's why the deconstruction is not only in the symbolic world, but also in the real world. Therefore, according to Wilderson, Fanon was right, and Lacan's analysis is incomplete, because Lacan takes for granted the matrix of violence that permits the subject to work on himself with this deconstruction in the symbolic world. So Wilderson says the black body labors as an enslaved hybridity of person and property, so that the analysan may labor as a liberated subject. You have to be on a certain side of the matrix to be able to be one of these subjects who have the privilege to work on themselves and go to the full speech. Therefore, according to Wilderson, Lacan's theorizing just fortifies the civil society, fortifies the incommensurability between black people and non-black people. And this idea of full speech is great, but should be called white speech or human speech. And Wilderson says black needs not apply. The fact Lacan's full speech is not accessible to black people. And to prove that, Wilderson discussed Jared Sexton and Steve Martineau's article Avant-Garde of White Supremacy, in which they talk about policing paradigm. Wilderson says, where violence is concerned, one must stay on the side of the wall of contingency, just as one must stay on the side of the wall of language by operating within the symbolic to enable full speech. So Sexton and Martineau talks about white people as people who are not only protected by the police, but are the police. They are deputized. Non-black people police black people. And the argument is a historical argument. It talks about how white people were obliged, forced to control the slaves. When a white person meets a black person in the streets, he has to see whether this black person has a ticket from the master of this black person, giving him the permission to walk outside by himself. If the black person does not have this permission in paper, the white person must punish this black person and take that black person to the master. So everyone police the black people / slave in South Carolina. And according to Wilderson, even though it's not as spectacular now, when we look at the liberals and the left, we see that there is also this kind of policing, even though they are against police violence. The way they frame police violence with their psychological, economic, political justification make it seem like violence toward black people is not gratuitous, which is a lie. Violence toward black people is gratuitous. And you have to be able to not be fooled by the spectacle of violence. Because the truth is, violence is on a daily basis. It's not just when you meet a bad police officer. It's gratuitous toward Black people. Wilderson reminds us that according to Lacan, you can deconstruct narcissism with full speech, and full speech for him is closer to Buddhism than Christianity, because you have no God, no church. It's a deconstruction. But it's suspicious that Lacan tells us that we must not go to the extremes of Buddhism when you practice full speech. You have to be controlled and just make sure that all you deconstruct is in the symbolic world, which is suspicious according to Wilderson. And same reasoning for white feminists like Kaja Silverman, who said, I in no way mean to propose catastrophe as the antidote. And for him, it's just a proof that Lacan and white feminists do not really want a complete deconstruction, because they are contemporaries, they are same species, and they are not ready to end of the world. It's true with the full speech as proposed by the white feminists, you are capable of deconstruct patriarchy, but full speech is not liberating for everyone. For Black and white people, discursive acts cannot be are not possible, because there's always gratuitous violence toward Black people when it comes to a relationship between a white person and a Black person, even when it's love, even when it's, how we said that, intimacy and seduction. Between white and Black people, there's always violence. So that's why free speech, full speech is not emancipatory for Black people. According to Wilderson, no communication is possible between Black and white people because there are two different species and two different zones. So he adopts Fanon's vocabulary as described in the chapter on violence in the book The Wretched of the Earth. Fanon said, to break up the colonial world does not mean that after the frontiers have been abolished, lines of communication will be set up between the two zones. The destruction of the colonial world is no more and no less than the abolition of one zone, its burial in the depth of the earth. So the deconstruction that Wilderson desires requires abolition. Which is not what Lacan proposed. As we can see, Wilderson mostly agrees with Fanon, with everything he said about the Manichaean word in the colonialist world. He agrees with this vocabulary of zones and species. The only element that that Wilderson did not appreciate about Fanon is the language that he thinks is too vague. He says, Fanon is a little too loose and liberal with his language when he calls it the zone of the post-colonial native. Because for Wilderson, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not about colonialism, it's about anti-Blackness. And that's not what Fanon talks about on violence. It talks about colonialism. So as I said earlier, Tuesday we will discuss To Address Black Suffering is to Destroy the World, which is an interview that Wilderson gave to students, I believe. No new material. And Thursday it will be a drop-in session. So again, thank you so much for participating in this class. It was great meeting you. Thank you so much.